Hello, everybody. Welcome to Breathe. This is Pastor Carter. We have a very special guest for the audience today. And this is the first episode that the co host, Shatara, will be accompanying me on this particular show. She's going to be interviewing Nicole Beverly. Um, just a This is one of the stories I think when it comes to domestic abuse, it needs to have awareness. It needs to get out the more and more. So when I first saw her story, I definitely wanted to um, get her on the show. So what I'm going to do right now is bring my co-host in, Shatara, and have her to introduce herself and different things of that nature. Hello, Shatara.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I am blessed. I am blessed.
Yeah.
Before we get into the show, your insight on domestic violence, just really quick, before we get into the show.
Um, my insight on domestic violence is very personal. Um, I liken Miss Beverly am a victim, us and me and my children of domestic violence from an intimate partner, my husband, my ex-husband. I experienced a lot of the same things that she has experienced. So 11 years of it. So
11
it's
years.
very, very traumatic,
Okay.
quite the experience. So I'm very excited to interview Ms. Beverly today.
All right. And welcome as the co-host.
Thank you.
I'm gonna bring in Miss Nicole Beverly. Right before I bring her in, though, I want people to watch a particular clip. Me
Hmm.
and Satara will watch it as well.
Yes.
I tried to flee through the garage, and he grabbed me by the back of my hair and dragged me back into the house, shut the garage door. He proceeded to choke me. We were in our laundry room area where we had shoes and boots. He was hitting me with those things. He weighed over 300 pounds, and he jumped on me with full force with his knee in my rib cage. And he was hitting me on the sides of my head, top of my head, stomach. Stood up and kicked me several times. He proceeded to hold a gun to my head, and he told me all the reasons he should kill me, that I was stupid, that I was lazy, that I wasn't a good parent, that I didn't deserve to live. He unloaded it, he reloaded it. He was pacing, yelling, screaming.
Nicole says he took her cell phone and car keys.
I remember thinking, do I try to run? Because I might make it out the door, but the likelihood of him shooting me in the back with me running is too great.
So I'm going to bring in Nicole Beverly. Hello, Nicole.
Hello.
Yeah, we just saw that horrific clip. I mean, that has to be something that I think me and Shatara was talking earlier that that's a horrific, me seeing the whole story on CNN as well. My heart goes out to you. Um, so Shatara, are you ready to start?
Yes, I'm ready to start.
Okay.
Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hello. I'm good.
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. I was actually personally looking forward to um, speaking with you, having so much in common with you. If you could please uh, just tell us who you are and give us a little insight or whatever you feel we need as far as insight on your domestic violence history.
Okay, and that's a tough one because it mine lasts such a long period of time, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. And
Mm-hmm.
my abuser, who is now my ex-husband, when we were actually in college, so we were very young. We were 18, just turning 19 when we first started dating at Eastern Michigan University.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the football team. He was very charming, charismatic. Our relationship began pretty quickly and we became pretty inseparable. And over time, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I knew nothing about domestic violence because no one had ever educated me on those red flags.
Mhm.
Looking back now, I can see the red flags that were there, the jealousy, the intensity, the isolation. But at that point in my life, being so young and in love, I saw those things as he just loved me so much. He just cared about me so much. I didn't know that those were red flags of a potentially abusive relationship. Over time, it was kind of a slower escalation, and it could be because we were so young, but over time the emotional abuse started, the name calling, the put downs, I'm stupid, I don't know anything, no one wants my opinion, to years later the physical abuse began and escalated to the point where, as you heard in the scene from Inside Evil with Chris Como, he had beaten me very severely and held a gun to my head, and told me, I still people ask me often, like, why didn't he pull the trigger? I don't know. And I thought for certain that day that I was going to die and never see my kids again. But he did not pull the trigger. Instead, the following morning, he made me apologize to him for making me almost kill him. And
Mhm.
he took, had my phone, my keys, he called me off work. And from that point forward, we went from the traditional cycle of domestic violence, where there's the moment of violence or emotional abuse, and then there's the apologies and the honeymoon, and I'm going to change phase, to this was now something he enjoyed. And there were no more apologies. And it got to the point where I was realizing, I was laying in bed trying to figure out, how am I going to get to the gun next time before he does? Because I knew, as he was telling me every single day, that if I told anyone, if I left him, he would hunt me down, he would kill me, he would find me no matter where I fled, with technology the way it is today. And the sad thing is that that is the truth. And with a private investigator, I've been told by multiple sources that within 10 minutes, someone can locate you with your social security number and your full name. So it's very scary right now for victims who are leaving. So eventually, 2.5 years, after I left him. So after that moment, it took me 4 more months to leave him, when I realized that I was trying to figure out how to get to that gun before him. And I still didn't tell anybody. I went to work every day. I made up excuses for any marks that were on my body. And I took care of my kids and just tried to go on my life as best I could, living in a situation that was horrible and miserable. And we had a beautiful house, and we had nice cars and beautiful children, but behind closed doors, it was darkness and anger and terror for me. Finally, I had several very, very negative experiences with police officers in the beginning, who did not believe me, who did not listen to me, who questioned my role in my stalking. And it took one officer in particular, Deputy Paul Corey, who was the first police officer basically in 2.5 years to actually listen to me and pay
Mhm.
attention. And he made the first of the arrests for domestic violence. And of course, well, many people don't know this, but the first charge for domestic violence is almost always pled down to, you basically take a class and you have no record. It's
Mhm.
like it never even occurred. Um,
Mhm.
and then the stalking continued, and he would get a personal protection order violation. Finally, picked up an aggravated stalking charge in 2011, when he actually followed me to the police station and was stalking me outside the police station where I was making a report, and then
Mhm.
waited for me and tried to run me off the road afterwards. It was, a horrible time for me. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, constantly afraid. But he, again, was allowed to plead that down to a misdemeanor. And he was right back out on the street again and continued to stalk and harass me. And then in 2012, things escalated to a point where he was arrested again and charged with aggravated stalking. And we went to court, and he was going to, without my permission, the judge had agreed to a cops agreement, which basically was going to let him right back out onto the street with the like 60 days, I think, that he had spent
And I decided at that point that I was tired of just being a passive victim. And I made a pretty powerful victim impact statement and asked the judge if he was prepared to raise my children when Max was me, because everything that had happened up to that point was predicting that he was going to kill me. And inevitably, the judge did withdraw the Cobb's agreement, and he was sentenced to 15 months in prison, up to 5 years. But our correction system often, once that person hits their minimum sentence, no matter what's happened inside prison, they are released. I didn't know this, at that point in time.
How soon are we on that? How long has he been?
Well, he was set to be released. And in fact, they moved him to Detroit Reentry Center. And it was that at that point that we had our first inmates coming forward about him offering to kill me. And so in all, he had offered 4 separate inmates at 4 different correctional facilities money to kill me and my children. And we had 2 separate inmates come forward at another at Jackson Prison who were stating that he ultimately was telling people that as soon as he got out, he was going to kill my children in front of me and then torture me to death. So unfortunately, the legal system did not protect me. And there were no new charges, and there were mistakes made, and there were interference on wiretaps, and my ex was moved before things could happen. And then ultimately in 2017, Luce County prosecutor Joshua Freed, who had the power in Luce County, where he was being housed at that time, to press new charges when the final inmate came forward about to attempt to hire. That gentleman had passed a polygraph and was willing to testify. There was too much background noise on the recording talking about exchange of money, and Joshua Freed refused to prosecute. So I was in a position where this investigation had taken 6 months, and I was so sure that we were getting new charges, and suddenly I found out that we weren't, and my ex was about to get out within 3 months. And it was absolutely terrifying. I took to social media at that point. Luckily picked up interest. The Detroit Free Press covered me, multiple radio stations, and we kind of went viral at that point. And people were able to, people at first, I think, didn't believe my story. Like how could a person attempt to hire this many people and there not be charges? Like this can't be real. This can't be true. But Kristen Jordan Seamus at the Free Press did an amazing job of including like pieces of police reports and really proving that what I was saying was true. And because we had enough support in the community, that pressure was put on the Attorney General, who was Bill Schuette at the time, his office. They ended up last second taking my case and us. And although he has never been charged with attempt to hire, he was ultimately, after a jury trial in Washington County, found guilty of witness intimidation. And witness intimidation was one of the charges he was found guilty of. And sorry, I'm blanking on it right now, the second charge, but he was guilty and sentenced to 13 to 30 years in prison. So his first eligibility for parole is 2030. And as we know, that's, likely when he will be released. And despite, what happens, I'm planning on, that's the amount of time that I've got left before he's released again.
That's that's a very, very touching synopsis, because I know it's a synopsis, because like I said, knowing and going through domestic violence, I know that you have to compile everything, into a short story, but there are very, very, very sensitive and graphic details included, in that story. I do want to thank you for sharing your experience, but I do want to ask you, I know you have children, right?
I do, yes.
How many children do you have?
So I have 2 boys, Miles, who just turned 21, and Carter, who will be 17 actually next week.
Okay. young men.
Yes.
Young men. So how have you coped with living? I see that you blatantly state that you have the mindset of that's how long you have left. It's very touching to hear, you speak that. Um, so I just want to know, how are you coping, and how do you gain your sense of peace, or how does your day look, and how are your children, in all of this?
Right. So in the beginning, when I first actually was between preparing to leave and leaving my abusive relationship, I relied very heavily on um, social media in terms of finding groups of domestic violence survivors and victims, and pages that supported that, because I didn't talk publicly about the fact that I was a survivor of domestic violence for about 2 years, until 2 years after I left that relationship. Um, After, connecting with survivors and seeing their stories, hearing their stories, and knowing that if they could overcome, I could too. It was incredibly, incredibly powerful for me. I also have background as a clinical social worker myself. And early on, myself and my boys did go to through counseling at Eastern Michigan University. They do have a psychology clinic, which is sliding scale, and it worked
Okay.
out well for us, especially my boys, because it was younger male students who
Mhm.
are supervised by PhD psychologists, but they were able to go to group and individual counseling there for a very inexpensive cost to me. Because when I first left my abuser, as many abusers do, and you are probably familiar with this, is financial abuse. So I was cut off from our bank account. All of our assets were withdrawn.
Mhm.
There was no child support. So I was
Mhm.
struggling financially for the first time,
Mhm.
long time once we left, and that was purposeful because he wanted me to be forced to return
Mhm.
to the relationship.
Your sense of control.
Yeah, and my boys went through the counseling. They're both very involved in sports, which was a huge asset in terms of coaches and positive male
Mhm.
roles and influences for them over time. And also I then started, once I got ready to tell my story and saw the impact that it had on other victims, I kept telling my story. And I think doing advocacy work and trying to change laws and helping people and trying to be as vocal as possible that there should not be shame in being a victim has helped me in my recovery also.
I was just gonna ask that same question, like what have you done um, for your peace, or what have you done for recovery? I know what I've done for recovery, and
Mhm.
and just reading about you and learning about you, um, your organization. Can you give us a little bit of insight about that?
Yeah, and I want to back up too and just say really quickly, one of the reasons that I stayed with my ex-husband for as long as I did was he kept telling me that as a single mother of two boys, especially two biracial boys, that I was never going to be able to manage them or manage that, and I would be, it wouldn't be a successful family. And that was part of the reason that I stayed, and that also I could not help my oldest son in terms of his athletic goals. And also,
Mhm.
my son did receive a full ride football scholarship and baseball scholarship for Delaware State University. So he was supposed to be moving into his senior year, except for COVID. Unfortunately, that's just a bump in the road that we're going to get through. But he did get a full ride scholarship. And then my younger son's going to be a junior at Lincoln High School. So um, I just think it's important to state that, because I think that's a common thing that abusers tell mothers, is that they can't
Mhm.
on their own and they can't raise children, especially boys, on their own, which I've never wanted to do. And I had
Mhm.
luckily had mentors in both of my children's lives, male mentors who stepped up. So I just wanted to back up and say that. Sorry. My organization is called the Enough Initiative.
Mhm.
essentially, after doing the work of domestic violence advocacy and speaking in high schools and colleges on my own, not knowing how much longer my ex-husband was going to be incarcerated, once I found out I had 10 more years, I decided to start my own nonprofit officially. And we are based on prevention. So I'm a huge believer that we are never going to change the domestic violence epidemic unless we teach our young people what the red flags are and how to avoid it. Because if we don't teach them, we're gonna continue to see people, male and female, entering into abusive relationships, and then we're putting on band-aids and putting out fires. We need to teach them early so that as soon as they see those red flags happening, they can, run for the hills. And in high schools, especially, so many of the young people will say to me, stay and talk afterwards, and they'll say, I had no idea, but I'm in an abusive relationship. And now the statistics are showing us 1 in 3 high school students is already in an abusive relationship. And they're not telling their parents, they are not telling their teachers, they are keeping it to themselves. So imagine if some of them didn't even know, those statistics could truly be higher, because a lot of the students are telling me, I didn't even know that what was happening to me was abusive, the emotional side. They see it as physical, but they don't recognize, the name calling and the put downs and the controlling behavior as abusive also.
Yeah, I think communication and conflict resolution, something that we miss out on very, very heavily, especially in our well, I wouldn't say especially, but mostly in our youth community. And it's very sad that we see a lot of violence, especially in our youth community. Um, I think that uh, with the world moving forward, we're losing the sense of we're getting out of touch. It is getting worse in a lot of ways. Where we need to be connected, and we need to learn how to deal with each other. We need to learn how to communicate with each other. And if we don't set the tone, I really commend you on going to our high schools and our youth, and being an adult who has experienced these things and setting the tone and helping them to understand what the warning signs are, what the red flags are, or, does this individual recognize that they are being abusive, because we don't know what's going on inside of these young children's, households. Um, just to back up a little bit, I'm sorry. When you backed up, I was like, okay, well, let me back up. Your children. I know that you said that they have, gone through counseling and things like that. But just to get a little bit personal, how do they have any um, triggers, or how are they really, doing after counseling? How are they really coping? I know that mental health is really not serviced that well. I know
Oh
that
yeah.
personally. So did they get the help that they need? How are they really, really doing, knowing, what's going on with their mother, and, the possibilities, of their father or abuser, getting out of prison?
Yeah, I mean, the especially in, our state, the services are pretty dismal in
Yeah.
terms of mental health and counseling. There really are no groups specifically for children who have resided in a household where domestic violence has occurred. And that's one of the things that Enough is growing to grow towards developing
Awesome.
those groups. So because we know without a doubt, statistics show us that if you are raised in a household and you are witnessing domestic violence, that you are 80 times more likely to become either a victim or a perpetrator of abuse. Because that is what you are seeing, that is what you think is normal. And I always tell kids, when I go into these presentations, I said, please, please, please know that me saying this does not mean if this is happening in your house that you will become a victim or that you will become a perpetrator, because you have the power to overcome those statistics. Those statistics don't mean this is going to happen to you. You have the power to change and change the direction of your life and who you become. But I think it's so important that that is stated, so that they are aware. And also, when I go into the presentations, and not to get too off track right now, but I think it's so important that there will be kids, young adults in my presentations who have never grown up in a household where it's occurring, who will never end up in an abusive relationship. However, they are going to end up being our teachers and our doctors and our judges, attorneys, and our police officers, who someday are going to be responding, and maybe they will remember something that was said during our presentation that will allow them as a police officer not to ask the victim what they did or why this is occurring. So I think it's so important that we're not just looking at it as we're protecting victims, we're changing societal views on domestic violence. And that's what we have to do to really make a dent. I'm sure you're aware that, rates are increasing. They're not going down. Homicide related to intimate partner violence have gone up from 1,800 to 2,300 in the United States over the past 3 years. We're clearly not doing something right. Really aren't many prevention programs at all in our states. And I saw a question pop up. Did you see that, about what laws need to change?
Yes, what laws need to pass to prevent situations like this? Yes.
That is a great question, because we've had one domestic violence related bill pass in the past, I believe, 13 years, last year. And we have actually, myself and several other victims, have been trying to pass the address confidentiality bill. I have testified before Senate twice already. It already, quote unquote, died on the floor in 2018 to be reintroduced in 2019. And if it does not pass by December of this year, it will be dead again and will need to be reintroduced. And that's a bill that would actually essentially protect victims' addresses, something that I desperately needed when we thought my ex was about to be released. And it would give them a P.O. box. It would give a fake address on their voter ID, on their driver's license, on their state licensure. And we only have a few months left again. And it's very frustrating as a victim, as a survivor, to see when we have animal cruelty bill after animal cruelty bill passed straight through. Question. And animal cruelty in our state is a felony crime, and domestic violence is a misdemeanor crime up until the third offense. And even after that, it's often pled back down to a second, which means it's still a misdemeanor. So there are so many laws that need to be changed and addressed, and training that needs to be done. But we are running into brick wall after brick wall when it comes to our state representatives and senators and actually getting this legislation done.
My God. I definitely understand what you're saying about the addresses. I ran into the holes and the gaps in the system, being that your address is protected in one instance, but you find out that it's clearly visible in another. Whereas if we had a system that if you're flagged as a domestic violence victim, that you're completely protected. I also, to my understanding, the response of police in regards to domestic violence needs to improve. The complete vision of human life needs to improve. Just speaking about, like you said, animal cruelty and different laws of that nature. What are we doing as humans to protect each other? When something happens like this, domestic violence, as you said, as we know, is something that's a serious issue. I know that there was something that I watched under your story. Something that I did not know is that police officers, their deaths they come from, for the most part, domestic violence responses, and that
Yes.
is very, very. It took my breath away. How do you feel about that as a victim? I know how I felt. You know, how do you feel knowing that those individuals who are supposed to protect you are at a higher risk of death, being in a domestic situation, just like ourselves.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I do think that if we had systemic change put into place and people were not allowed to continue to plead down their offenses to misdemeanors and allowed to continue to have access to firearms even after they've had multiple domestic violence charges that then allow them to shoot police officers when they respond. I feel like this is a victims of domestic violence are often blamed for their abuse. They're stupid. They stayed in this relationship. They asked for it. It's like it. People don't really take the time to learn about it. And I always tell people, in high school, had you told me that this would be my life story, I would have told you absolutely not. Like, I was this loud, outspoken young woman who never would have dreamt that I would end up walking in these shoes, but here I am, and this is my truth. And people don't understand, the psychological manipulation that abusers use. They don't understand that, we're staying for our children, and we're staying because we're financially have nowhere to go, and the shelters are full. And we call the police, and our abuser may or may not be arrested, but more than likely they're going to be released the next day, and they're going to be more angry with us than they were before they were arrested and released the next day. And then we're in more danger. And those are all systemic issues that have to be changed in order, for there to be fewer homicides of domestic violence, which I don't know if I mentioned this, and we know abuse happens to men and women, but people that are being killed are women. And it's like 99% of intimate partner homicide, it's women that are being murdered. And, in order for us to reduce that and, violence towards officers who are responding to these crimes, we have to have large scale systemic change in terms of the way we view the crime.
How does your I know I see another question. What do you think society um why do you think society overlooks domestic violence?
You know,
What do you
I
think?
think
Why do you
I think, I kind of, basically for the reason that I stated is what I see. And even with my story, when my story went viral, and I had to stop reading the comments because people, like, if there was an article or if I was on the news and people were commenting, people were so victim blaming often. Well, she was stupid, she deserved this. There's not the same empathy that there is for someone who is a sex trafficking survivor. There is not
Yes.
the same empathy that there is for someone who is a kidnapping survivor or an assault survivor by stranger. It's a perception that if you are assaulted by your partner, it's different. And somehow you are responsible for that. And I think that is a huge, I know it's a huge undertaking for us to change that perception, but I think by educating and explaining the reasons that we do stay and why it takes most women victims 7 times to leave an abusive relationship before they leave for good. It can help people. And we're also looking at now too, the effects of trauma, the effects of brain injury, the effects of neurochemicals that are happening in abusive relationships too. So there are physical causes as well as the emotional causes that we're seeing. We have to educate society so that they stop victim blaming, because when you victim blame, the victim's going to stay in the abusive relationship, right?
Absolutely.
They're not going to ask for help. They're going to be embarrassed. And until we end that, more and more people will continue to die and stay in abusive relationships.
I'm in total agreement with you. The perspective of domestic violence definitely has to change. I think that the insensitivity um, is very great. I think that, like you said, some people, they view the victim as someone who is also a contributor. And a lot of times that's not the case. Most of the
Mhm.
times, actually, that's not the case. They're truly a victim.
Mhm.
I can remember and recall, 99% of the times, I know that, no one's perfect, but no one
Absolutely.
ever deserves abuse. But
Right.
I can recall multiple times, just being abused for no reason. I can be asleep and I'm pulled out of my bed, literally by my ankles and beat. They take everything that you have that gives you power, my glasses, my phone, whatever it is to get the word out that they're doing what they're doing.
Mhm.
It's very, very, it's a traumatic situation. And when you talk about, how that plays on not only, the mental, the emotional, the physical, aspects of your life, it definitely goes hand in hand. Whatever happens to you physically as a mental effect, an emotional effect.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was sick because of it, and it turns out, it was mental anguish, it was trauma, that was causing
Absolutely.
me to physically be sick. It's just like,
Mhm.
you get nervous, your hands sweat. You get it, you get
Absolutely.
butterflies. They have to intertwine these things. We are
Mhm.
human beings. Everything that happens on the outside affects the inside.
Absolutely.
So, I it's very, very touching to hear your story and how personal it is. How are you coping though, um, with this?
And I'm seeing someone just asked the name of the bill. So it is the Address Confidentiality Program
Mhm.
bill. And right now it is at the Senate level. Senators Lucido, Ruth Johnson, Senator Jeff Irwin, they are on the panel that is overseeing the bill at this point in time. And I encourage people to reach out to them and let them know that you see the importance and value of victims of not just domestic violence, but stalking and sexual assault and sex trafficking being able to be protected by this bill that 38 other states have, but the state of
Mhm.
Michigan does not have, which most people think of us as being a progressive state, but when it comes to domestic violence laws and protections, we are not a progressive state.
My God. My God.
But in terms of myself and how I'm doing now, I tend to stay very busy, just a little. But I just something that was a very difficult project for me that I am just wrapping up was writing my story, and
Okay.
it will be published probably in November, somewhere between October and November, and it's called Finding Nicole. And I had to actually leave and go somewhere secluded for 3.5 days to really get into the dark and the deep and the nitty gritty, because it was so, even though it's, I've done a lot of work to recover, and so much time has passed when you're reliving these experiences. And for me,
Right.
it's the abuse, but then it was also, I was abused by the legal system in addition to my abuser, because they were not listening to me. They were not protecting me. They were, um, on so many occasions, someone could have done the right thing. And in
Yeah.
reality, it was the inmates that were housed with my ex-husband that kept trying to throw us a lifeline. They were the
Mm.
kept reporting it and saying, we're worried about this family, please help them.
You said
And
the inmates?
the inmates, there were over the course of his incarceration from 2012 until 2016, there were 6 inmates that came forward, either in all at different facilities except 2 were together at one, um,
Hmm.
reporting that he was either saying as soon as he got out, he was going to come to my home and kill my children in front of me and torture me to death, or that he had offered them money. 2 of them had even had passed polygraph exams, but the police officers and the prison system and the parole department with their mistakes, and this will all be in my book. Because police reports and the prison documents are all public information, I'm sharing them in my and of course blocking out the inmates that were trying to help us, their names. But there were so many instances where they tried to help us and then law enforcement messed up and there were no new charges. And had he actually been convicted of attempt to hire, he could have served life in prison. But because there were so many mistakes and police officers who believed, and I'm not kidding you, this is a direct quote from a police report, that his body language made him seem like he was telling the truth and wasn't a danger. And that was after the third attempt to hire that police report stated that. I was suffered abuse at both levels. And many victims do. I don't know if you did, but and for many victims, the court system allows abusers to continue to abuse through custody, through the divorce process. People, we're hearing story after story. A victim, we just lost a family of 4 in Belleville where there was a protection order, and the young woman's ex came and shot her and her 3 cousins, and they
So
all.
they thought that was me.
Oh,
They thought that was me. And that story, my family called me. They thought that was me.
okay. How terrifying for them.
Very terrifying.
Yeah.
Very,
And
very, very
it happens
terrifying.
every day, where we as victims are not taken seriously by law enforcement and judges who have the power to protect us. And it breaks my heart every time, I see reports of yet another victim who has reached out for help and protection, who has been killed because they have not received that. And it happens. I get contacted daily about stories or victims who are having difficulties.
Mr. Carter, he's asking, how has this affected your trust with relationships in the government?
So like dating relationships in the government or relationships with the government? Sorry.
I mean, the question of relationships would be great, because I know that mentally, I would like to know, how has that affected, you dating and moving forward with your life as well? And he says both.
Yeah. So in terms of the dating aspect, it is definitely difficult. Definitely have walls that are very high. And if I see any type of sign for a red flag, I am out. I will also say that, because I was going through literally, 5 years of someone who was trying to hire people to kill me from prison, I wasn't the most desirable person to date. I mean, I can laugh about it. I have to laugh. You know what I mean? Because
I understand. I definitely understand.
I would be dating someone and they'd be like, oh, it's fine. But then once it got down to the nitty gritty and it's like, this person, again, has tried to hire someone to kill me.
Right.
Or I report for this. People then are like, I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was going to be. So that made dating incredibly difficult, because people are afraid, and especially people who have children. They don't want harm to themselves or their children, which I fully understand. So like, I feel like I personally have done the work now where I really truly identified like what my my must-haves and my disqualifiers are, for a healthy relationship, and I try to stick true to those, knowing what I'm looking for in a relationship. But without a doubt, survivors of abuse have walls built up, and I advise them to take time off before dating. The likelihood of you ending up in another abusive relationship if you don't do the self-work and the personal work is very high. And see time and time again is it may not be the level of physical abuse as the relationship that they left, but instead they're entering into an emotionally abusive relationship.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, well, it's not as bad because it's not physical. So
it's worse.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
really, it's, emotional abuse takes a long, long time to recover from, and that's part of the reason I called my book "Finding Nicole" is because hi, Amy. Because I truly, I didn't know who I was anymore. My ex-husband broke
Mm,
down to someone who no longer knew what they liked to do for
yeah.
fun. I didn't even know like what music I liked anymore. I truly had to find myself and basically build myself back up again from nothing. Like I could not even, like now I can speak in front of people. And I think, my
Mhm.
biggest accomplishment was at the Women's March and I spoke in front of 3,000 people. But when I left my abusive relationship, I could look no one in the eye. Like if you
Mm,
I was doing everything I could because I felt so, my self-esteem, I was so broken. It was so low
yeah.
that I truly felt like I did not matter and I had no value. And it took
Yeah.
time to find myself again and victims
Mm.
to really give themselves that time to heal and find out who they truly are before they rush into another relationship.
What advice do you give to young women? I mean, you were young like me, getting married, getting in a relationship. What advice do you give to young women who feel that they're in love, but they're in an emotional or physically abusive relationship?
So my advice is if you are seeing the red flags of emotional abuse and physical abuse, get out of the relationship as quickly as you possibly can. Because, again, I'm going to statistics and data, but the truth is it's really showing us that the recidivism rate for someone, which basically means like they're going to do it again,
Mhm.
is incredibly, incredibly high. If someone hits you once, if someone shows you a pattern of emotional abuse, the likelihood
Mhm.
of them changing is very, very low. And I think
Mhm.
often if some of us are uh, empaths and are very empathetic and we want to help people, and we want to change people, we are more easily sucked into these relationships because we feel like we can change people and we can make them different when the truth is we cannot. And,
Mhm.
once they are going to hit you again, it may be
Mhm.
a month from now, it may be a week from now, it may be a year from now, but it's going to happen again. Um,
Absolutely.
and I say that with confidence because I've, talked to hundreds, thousands of victims, at this point with my work through across the United States. And it's the same story
Mhm. Mhm.
that they try to change, they try to do right, but in the meantime you're being broken down, you're losing
Yes.
your self-esteem. And I love to try to educate people about the different like tactics that abusers use, like gaslighting,
Mhm.
tricking you into believing that things didn't really happen or that you caused
Mhm.
things to happen, that you even start to question yourself, like,
Mhm.
did that really
Abuse
happen
is
that
very
way?
tactful.
They're so good. I mean, they're so
Very
good at
good.
it. Yeah, which is why, it's so important to really empower people, I think, by teaching them the
Mhm.
strategies that abusers use so that when you see it happening, you're like, oh, that's gaslighting. Oh, those are flying monkeys. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different abuse tactics that are, we,
Mhm.
us in the survivor world joke that it's almost like they read the same guidebook. Like
You
they,
know what? Abuse is a learned behavior. And that I know that we're 49 minutes in, but I have to ask this question. Being that abuse is a learned behavior, we're not born saying, "Hey, I'm going to be an abuser," when I grow up, or I'm going to be a victim. You have to experience um, that. So I wanted to know or ask you, um, did your ex-husband experience domestic violence or trauma or abuse as a child? And did you know if he did?
Yeah, so he, actually his biological mother left.
Hmm.
He was quite young, related to physical abuse by his father. And then his dad remarried and he was basically raised by his stepmother because his biological mother moved out of state, and the physical abuse and emotional abuse definitely continued into that relationship. But I had no idea, again, in college, that could even factor in,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that he could end up being abusive towards me.
Yeah.
And I personally did not grow up in a household where domestic violence was occurring at all, but I grew up in a household where no one ever sat me down and told me this is what you look for. This is what you need to be aware of. I was naive. There, most people were good people in this world, and I had no clue that I needed to even be aware of this. So, but looking, knowing what I know now, absolutely, I'm quite sure his father, was a negative role model in terms of relationships and learning how to treat other people. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to educate. I know this session is about domestic violence prevention through education. Information is everything. Education is everything. It's very important to educate just people. Period. I wouldn't even say just our youth, but definitely our youth, but everyone on what domestic violence looks like, how to gauge, certain things as far as getting into relationships or serious relationships when considering dating or marriage or having children, because you're considering becoming one. And if you don't know that person's background, how they grew up, what their family history is, it's pretty difficult to understand who that person is, who they become, what they went through, what their mindset may be, what troubles they may come across, when being in a relationship, what triggers, you may come across. And I didn't know, but now knowing, it makes sense. Like I said, a lot of the times the the abused become the abuser, if nothing is done about it. And unfortunately, this happened, to you and your children. But fortunately, you are able to tell your story. And fortunately, you are able to, be there for your sons and empower others, and helping them to educating them, on what those warning signs, what those red flags are, just being out there. And I appreciate you and your advocacy, with domestic violence, because it's something that's needed just as a citizen. Like you said, we're not getting the justice or the due diligence that we need in a judicial system as we desperately need, because lives are being lost.
Absolutely.
Even those in our law enforcement, lives are being lost. So it's like, when are we going to do what we need to do? Who's going to see this? I really, really encourage our listeners to reach out to the individuals she mentioned, Ludiso, I believe, Ruth Johnson Irwin. If you
Jeff
could state
Irwin.
just the bill again that needs to be passed.
Sure. It's the the state of Michigan address confidentiality program bill. And right now it is still at Senate committee. So the committee chairman is Senator Pete Lucido. And then Ruth Johnson and Jeff Irwin were the two senators who reintroduced the bill. After it kind of died on the floor previously. Stephanie Chang is actually also on that Senate committee. So people could reach out to her as well. And I do want to give props, and I know we're really close to getting this passed in Washtenaw County. I myself and Safe House worked with the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department very, very hard on lethality assessments, starting to be done for every domestic violence call. And Ariane Slay, who was she was actually a prosecutor for me early on in my case, but then also continued to be like a huge person in my life in terms of keeping my family safe, even when she was no longer assigned to my case. She's been instrumental too in getting the lethality assessment set up. So what that would do essentially is it would create, like, if there's a domestic violence call. When officers respond, they will be following a structured series of questions that will then assess the lethality risk for that victim being killed by their abuser. It would be attached to the police report that would go to the prosecutors when they're determining if charges are going to happen. I think 15 911 calls and 2 ended up in arrests. So I'm hopeful this could be a positive change for other victims, not having to do what I did. And then also it will go to the judges when they're deciding bond. So let's hope that if a judge sees that this victim is at extreme risk for homicide, they're not going to turn around and just allow this assailant to be put right back on the street the next day.
Right.
The likelihood of them killing their victim is extremely high. So when I talked to Ariane last, just a few weeks ago, they were just finishing the training video, but it is going to be not just the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department doing this, but every police department in Washtenaw County voted yes, that they're going to begin these assessments. And that was after I was rejected at the state level. They said, statewide, we're not doing this. So we kept pushing Washtenaw County, and we'll say, you know what, then we'll do the work and we'll show the effectiveness so that we can then prove that statewide it can be effective and it can save lives.
That's absolutely amazing. So what can we do? What can our listeners do? What can we do here at Breathe to assist you?
Yeah, so
How can we reach you? How can we assist you?
Yeah, so check out our, so we have a Facebook page, The Enough Initiative. We also have a website, which is www.the-enoughinitiative.com. Oh, I see it floating on the bottom. Perfect timing. On there we have information about our organization, and then there's also some tips for safety planning if you are getting ready to leave an abusive relationship, and then also tips for parents who have maybe suspecting that their teenager is in an abusive relationship or potentially abusive. And I get quite a few calls, from parents asking either or, which I think is great because I think that parents are asking these questions. Also, we are, COVID has made things a little bit more difficult, but we are going to be increasing our online learning curriculum. I was supposed to be going to North Carolina A&T in October and doing live presentations, but we're going to be doing it virtually instead, which I'm so excited though that I'm getting this opportunity to take enough there. And that was arranged by a former high school student who was at our presentation in high school, and he's now a Kappa and is like, I want to bring to our university, and he made this happen, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. I can't wait.
Awesome.
Live. I'm like, are you sure we can't be live? No. So, but we're creating more virtual education opportunities for high school and colleges while we're dealing with COVID.
Awesome.
All right. I have a question for you, Nicole.
Yes.
As far as your children is concerned, have they ever expressed because I know a lot of times when it's abuse or an alcoholic in the family, or if it's a parent, I think a lot of times the children is afraid, man, is that going to rub off on me? Right. Is that going to be something that I don't want to be that part of my father? I don't want that. Do they worry about that? Is that something that concerns them?
I would say that my younger son probably worries about that more than my older son. My kids have very, very different personalities.
Okay.
And also, I think there's a 4-year age difference that came into play too. So my older son, I think, does have more positive memories of his dad, where my younger son probably has more just of the negative memories because the violence and emotional abuse had really become much more severe by that point in time. So that definitely had an impact. And, I worry, did I leave soon enough? All the time, and I know my kids because I'm a therapist and I'm always talking and they're always hearing, the stuff that I talk about, but I sat down and said to them, multiple times, like, did I leave soon enough? Do you guys feel, are there concerns that you have? What can I do to help? Because they really haven't had a very positive relationship model to live under. and to witness. So I hope and pray and that, I left soon enough and got them the support that they needed. But it is very scary. And I think if more victims can kind of think about the kids, and the impact that staying in an abusive relationship, even though it seems like the right decision, how greatly our children are impacted by us staying is very great.
Okay.
Mm.
I felt this was a very important topic. Very important topic. That's why I thought Shatara, when she came aboard as a co-host, I thought it was definitely right, good timing for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as how can I put it? Because you're a very busy woman. I've been following you on Facebook, and I can see the shoes. Did you ever get rid of those shoes?
Don't ever. Okay, words of wisdom. Don't ever do a shoe fundraiser.
I mean, it was like I was like, oh my God, it was like a room full of shoes. You had to have like thousands of shoes. It looked
They're
like
still
thousands.
here. They're still here. They're in my shed. I have 3,205, no, 2,050 pairs of shoes in my shed. And I was in a complete panic yesterday because my shed started leaking again. So we were literally like had pans and buckets trying to catch from, because like some squirrels had decided to try to get into my shed. And so at this moment, I'm waiting for Funds to Orgs to schedule the date to come with their semi to pick up those shoes. But I joke, but the truth is our goal was 2,500 pairs of shoes. So we get paid by the pound. And then all of the shoes are going to be going to third world countries where micro entrepreneurs
Mm.
will be refurbishing them and distributing them to people who don't have shoes. And so our community came together, and not just, we didn't just hit our goal, like we went way over our goal. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, 2,500 pairs of shoes, that's no big deal. And we're sitting in a room with like 700 shoes. We got to band them together and put them in bags. It was, I'm so thankful for my team of volunteers and my board members and other community members who reached out, and they actually put boxes on their porches for us, for other people, and went and did pickups for us. Like, it was an incredible. Hi, Michelle. Michelle is one. So I just want to add this. So Michelle is a huge supporter, and Michelle's mother was actually killed by her stepfather
Oh,
in 2018, right here in Ypsilanti. Her mother, Martha. So she's been a huge supporter, and she, has lived through both being a victim of a child, who grew up witnessing domestic violence, not really knowing what was happening, but then as an adult lost her mother to domestic violence right here in Ypsilanti Township. So Michelle's been amazing, and she's gotten right on board with, helping us with our getting the word out and advocacy to help prevent other women victims from being killed.
Mm. My God. Well, thank you, Michelle, for being a great supporter. And my gosh.
Yeah,
yeah.
we definitely had a community that went above and beyond on the shoes, which I'm grateful, but I'll also be very happy when they get picked up. So yeah, I've told my team that if I ever say something super crazy like that again, to please tell me to think about it overnight. Michelle,
Hey,
you're
Michelle.
awesome.
Oh man, I see you on Facebook. You do a lot of things, and thank you for doing what you do. You're a true example of somebody being beat down but rising again, and making it to a point that you can help other women um, to understand and identify with men that's aggressive or that's super abusive and save lives. That's the main thing. That's the main goal.
Mm.
So I truly appreciate you. I believe you truly need it. And before we go, if Shitara has something she may have wanted to say to you as well.
Hmm. Um, Anytime I speak with someone who has experienced domestic violence, like myself, or has gone through anything, um, I encourage the ladies in my empowerment leadership group. I want you to speak positivity over your life. I know that you've mentioned a couple of times, and I've watched quite a bit of footage of you. But you mentioned about your expectation of death,
Mhm.
and it touches me very personally to hear you say that. Um, just speaking from one survivor to the other, I would like for you to speak positivity into your life, and not saying that you're going to succumb to domestic violence, but say that you're going to overcome and empower, not only yourself but
Mhm.
others continuously. I don't like to hear anybody say, that they're going to succumb or they're in the expectation of succumbing to uh, of violence, because that creates sort of a kind of a mindset, with us that creates sort of a block in our healing. And I want you to definitely to overcome that block. I understand that you have to be on guard. I understand that completely, but I don't want you to speak that over your life.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. When Chris Como was here and he interviewed me, and we were literally 2.5 months out from my ex getting out of prison, that truly was my reality. But I have always, even despite and going through everything that I went through, knowing people were being hired to kill me and not knowing who already was out on the outside that had maybe bought into that, I refused to live my life in fear, because I truly believe that a life lived in fear is a life lived without joy. And I have really, I try to focus on everything positive, and I think helping others has really, like, we just moved a victim across states. Literally, her state refused to help her, and it took, like, there were 5 of us who were survivors, and Michael Hodges, who is absolutely amazing, who I met, he and his wife, through after they watched my episode of the show. But we all came together and we literally got this victim across the country to safety,
Mm.
children. And getting messages from her telling me, or from her kids, like, just saying how well they're doing and how happy they are and how they could not have done it without the help of us, which is sad because it should be the responsibilities, right, of the state and the system to help us do this, but that's not happening. It's not happening. Victims are not receiving what they need. But that brings me so much joy and peace of knowing that she and her kids are safe now. And it was, because of the work that we did. I think I just, moments like that help me grow so much more, and just fuel me and fuel the fire inside of me to help more people,
Yeah.
and make that impact more. So yeah, I definitely have come a long way from that interview with Chris, when I truly, that's where I was at that point in time. And had the attorney general not taken my case, I would have either stayed here and lived my life in fear truly, or I would have had to change my name, my social security number, and basically disappear. And, the people that I reached out to told me basically, then you lose your education, you lose your degrees, and you lose all of your work history. And I realized on how hard it was going to be for me to find a job that would allow me to support my children. And those are things that are, whenever I hear someone say, "Oh, just tell a victim to leave," if only it were that simple. If
Yeah, not
only
easy.
were that simple. So I appreciate those words, and just know that I am definitely in a different place. That interview where I truly, it almost, you know, and other women who have experienced similar things to me, it felt almost like a terminal illness.
Mm.
Knew that it was inevitable. Um, and I hate to say that, but that's where I was, and that was my
Yeah.
reality. No one was helping us.
Yeah.
No matter where I reached and who I called and what I did, that's the closest thing I can compare it to, and they've compared it to the same thing is a terminal illness that, you know, you have this much time left and you make arrangements for your kids and
Right.
you care for them, you know, after, you know, your death, which, you know, when people are determined to come after you in that way, you really start to feel that way. And I think with my ex in particular, I don't think he would have stopped.
Mm. God.
Wow. Nicole, again, thank you for coming on. Very powerful story, very powerful message to our young women and men alike.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
men alike, because I feel like I encourage men, if you feel yourself getting out of control, to seek help before um, something like this can happen to one of our ladies. But I love the way you bounced back. Again, I'm inspired by your story, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing it with us here at Breathe. And I will most definitely reach out to you a little bit later this week, and we'll talk some more about helping the organization as much as we can.
Okay, excellent. Thank you guys both so much, and thank you for sharing your personal story too, Shatara. I appreciate,
Thank you.
you know, everything that you've been and been through, and you know, I'm sorry that you had to go through that too. Hi, Melissa. But you know, obviously, you are an overcomer, and you know, are speaking your story and telling your story, which is amazing. And the more
Mm.
people we have like you doing that, you know,
Mm.
sooner we can hopefully make the changes that need to be made.
Yeah. We have to get together.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We definitely have to get together. This is not
I would
it.
love
That's for
that.
sure.
I would love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you for
Thank
coming
you.
on the show.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. That was a very eye opener. That was an eye
It really
opener. I tell
was.
you, it was something that I had been looking forward to, Shatara, for a while, ever since we had set it up, um, because I believe it was a story that needed to be told. Um, and I thank God, you know what I mean, for having you here as well, as the co-host. You did a great job, especially being your first time. I know the nerves had to grow some nerves of steel, but you did.
I,
You did. You did good, and I just want you to know that I'm proud of you as well.
Thank you.
So that's the end. And was there anything that you wanted to say before we end the show, Shatara?
Um, I always have something to say, but just if you are experiencing domestic violence, whether that be physical and emotional, yes, we are stronger together, Michelle. I have to reach out to you too. We're much stronger together. We have to band together because, as you see, we need as much support as possible because there are gaps. There are um, holes in the system that need to be fixed because lives are being lost, families are being destroyed. Barriers need to be broken. It's not just for women; it's men that go through abuse as well. I want to say that, and we have to, advocate for both. But if you are experiencing domestic violence in any way, in shape, or form, you have to understand that you have to get out. Seek help. Seek support whatever way you can. That's the best advice. Like Nicole said, you have to. You just have to.
All right. All right. It was a blessing for this show. Thank you, Shatara. Thank you, Nicole. And
Thank you.
meet us here next Saturday. And we have another spotlight show for you guys. God bless you. And I will see you soon.